I remind you, you can click on the globus and then you will have the interpretation below.
I will present our case study. So Mettler has implemented demand-driven MRP. We went live 1 month and a half ago with 6 units, and I would like to explain our case study. First, a little bit of myself. So my background and my experience is a lot of SAP. So I've been working 20 years in SAP, so quite an IT guy. Currently, I'm working as head of global planning in Mettler Toledo. Some other information. So I have 2 children, 8 and almost 4, a boy and a girl. I've been living in Zurich for 12 years, but I'm originally from Barcelona. So one of the reasons that I am staying in Switzerland is because I like very much Switzerland and the Swiss mountains. I like also to cycle in the Swiss mountains. So the photo that we have here is a photo of Switzerland. My bike is not here. I like also basketball. So the horse is not small, it's because I'm quite big. And I'm also supporting Barcelona. So I don't think it's a good year for us, but I'm still supporting Barcelona. Then I would like to give you a little introduction about our company, Mettler Toledo. So Mettler Toledo originally was a company that was producing scales and balances. And now the business, so since a lot of years, the business changed to manufacture and provide products that measure things. And we provide different types of products for customers for their supply, for the complete supply chain. So we are a B2B company and we produce some products for R&D. For instance, we produce precision scales or we produce pipettes. So we have a huge demand of pipettes right now. We produce products for quality control. For instance, we produce pH meters or densimeters that measure the pH for liquids and gases. We produce also a scale-up and production devices. For instance, all the main manufacturers are using Mettler devices to measure the quantity of oxygen during the production of the vaccines. So all the main ones uses Mettler Toledo. Sensors, we use it also for production. In production, we can see scales of any form for floor scales, any type of scales, also counting material scales of them. We use it for packaging. Here we have our metal detectors or our X-ray detectors that, especially for the food industry, we check if something is wrong in the products. We combine this with check weighers that at the same time measure the weight of the products. In logistics, we have track scales, for instance. We produce track scales or train scales. And for food retail, we do scales also for supermarkets. Then a little bit about our supply chain strategy. Our supply chain flow is really very, very simple. So we have 3 hubs, one in North America, one in Europe, and one in Asia Pacific. And then we have a lot of different POCs production organizations. In each of the regions, we have several production organizations where we produce our products, and we deliver all our products to the corresponding hub. Then from each of the hub, we serve to the region all the products, all the different products. To do it a little bit more graphic, I have here this world map. So we have 3 hubs, one in America, one in Europe, one in Asia Pacific. Between each of them, we have daily shipments that we send goods from one part of the country to one region of the world to another region of the world. We have also production site or manufacturing site in each of the region, and each of them delivers to the hub. This one is in Ohio, this one is in the Netherlands, and this one is in Shanghai. And from each of the hubs, so for instance, if a Russian customer requires a scale from us, we deliver this from Netherlands. So all the different marketing organizations, Switzerland, Italy, France, Spain, Russia, Poland, If a customer from each of the regions asks a scale, more than 95% of the products will be delivered from the hubs. We have some exceptions, for instance, with metal detectors or X-ray detectors, which are very big. We deliver it directly from the production organization. So the logistic flow really simple. The product portfolio is quite rich. So we are using SAP, and today we have more than 1 million references or materials in SAP, and half millions are active materials. So the type of products is very different, from make to stock to make to order, really engineering to order, all type of products. Before knowing anything about demand-driven MRP, something that we identify is that planning was a key to have better performance in the global supply chain. So we are a company that has been growing a lot. So since I joined 12 years ago, the revenue has triplicated. And since this slide is from 2018, since several years, the on-time delivery was good, but flat. We were not improving the on-time delivery. Our ITO was going down. Typically happen this when the company is growing a lot. So the idea is to produce as much as possible to serve our customers, but the ITO was too big for us. The forecast accuracy, we had some projects to improve the forecast accuracy in some of the regions, but despite this, our forecast accuracy was going down. And something that we were realizing is that the bullwhip effect was going up, especially for our vendors. The forecast was every time worse and worse. So something that we wanted, for that reason, we create this global team. It's called Global Planning, that we drive the strategy for planning worldwide. And also we support the units. We had two areas of improvement. One of them was the process area, where we define one strategic initiative. It's called Simplified Planning. What we wanted in 2018, before knowing about anything about demand-driven MRP, well, we were going from traditional MRP. We had also some Kanban and Lean. Our idea was to implement advanced planning systems. So IPO, IBP. Why? Because this was our references in other companies. If we want to have better forecasts, if we want to handle better all the exception messages created by the MRP, we have to use an advanced planning system. In terms of master data, we have another strategic initiative. There is the master data automation. We want that our master data is calculated more automatically. Our vision, and it's our vision, so it's difficult to happen like this, but our vision is that no master data is entered by a planner, so that all master data can be calculated. We have some achievements. For instance, all the lead times that we provide to our customers are automatically calculated, so no planner enter a lead time towards the customer. So today is automatically calculated, but still we have a lot of improvement in the scope, like plan delivery times that can be calculated automatically, that can be delivered by the vendors. So a lot of improvement here. Okay, so the first thing that we did is brainstorm a little bit. So how do we improve our planning? Typically, when we brainstorm, we check internally what we are doing, and we check externally what other companies are doing. So first, we will begin checking what we are doing. Here you can see which are the planning strategies that we are using to create orders in a make-to-stock environment. The first one is the reorder point. So for 30% of the materials, we were using reorder points. The concept is very simple. When the stock falls below the reorder point quantity, we create a new supply order. We try to use this for inexpensive and low volumes parts, so typically C materials. For 60% of the materials, we were using MRP. The concept is also clear. We put a forecast, and then the MRP creates orders for the components to fulfill the scope, for the products and the components to fulfill this forecast. The challenge that we had here is that it was very difficult for us to have a correct forecast, and every time was more difficult to have a correct forecast. The third way that we order things in a make-to-stock environment is with lean principles. Here on the right on the screen, we have a screenshot of SAP of several Kanban cycles. When we have a Kanban that it's red, it's empty, this is the signal to trigger a new order. The main challenge that we can have in Kanban is that it's very good and also very visual, but we require a stable demand and short lead times. And then always was in our brain, in our idea to implement advanced planning systems like APO. Until now, we didn't implement it because we were thinking that it's a big change, it's quite expensive, and it's not intuitive. So it requires some IT skills and some additional planner skills. But our idea in 2018 was to implement some kind of advanced planning systems to have better forecasts and to deal better with all the exception messages from MRP. And sadly, in 2019, we had a new way of planning. This new way of planning was demand-driven MRP. We were reading a little bit about demand-driven MRP, and what we read is, well, it's a new planning methodology that Karol Petak and Chad Smith invented. And the main idea is that we are going to use dynamic buffers in the middle of the supply chain. These dynamic buffers are calculated using demand and not forecast. And this is the main change that we had in demand-driven MRP. So instead of using the forecast, we are going to use demand, the past consumptions, to define the buffers, to put some buffers within the supply chain. Okay, so now we know a little bit about demand-driven MRP, and then question that everybody does at some point. So most probably some of you are already doing this question. Is demand-driven MRP a good solution for us? So why don't we use advanced planning systems? Why don't we have better forecasts? Why don't we use this? In 2019, our answer is we have no idea. We don't know if it's a good solution or not. What we realized quickly is it seems easy to try. So conceptually, it's not very complicated. Once you read the book, you understand it quite well. Some other things that we knew is that, yes, in case it works, it will save a lot of efforts in having accurate forecasts. And also that the results at that time in other few companies look very good. So the next step that we did is the first, Karol has mentioned this before, training. So we did some demand-driven MRP training. The first thing we did this official demand-driven MRP training. Luckily, our professor had spoken 15 minutes ago. We were very lucky with this. And also we begin to read about demand-driven MRP and about demand-driven adaptive enterprise. Our pilot software was Business Warehouse for HANA. Our initial idea was to use Excel and with some macros because it looks quite simple. We need some planning information, some consumptions, and we can build up our own pilot software. But instead of this, we create our own software based on the technology plus Business Warehouse for HANA from SAP. The scope was, we tried to implement a smaller scope, so only 900 materials in 3 European plants. Only 900 materials, no more than this. We select good performing units, so one of the hubs and 2 POs, but we will try to select complicated materials. So this is also an advice from Karol Petak, try to put in the pilot complicated materials. So we put complicated materials in the system. The results were really good. So we increased OTD for more than 5%, and we are in the 90s percentage of on-time delivery. So really good. So the sales order reconfirmation was decreased less than 50%. Sales order reconfirmation means that we confirm one date to the customer and then we change it. So this decreased more than 50%. Something that was very good is missing parts in production. We reduced by more of 75%, and the inventory we reduced it by more than 15%. So we had some ideas of what could be the advantages. Indeed, the result of this first pilot with 900 materials were better than expected. So well, after this pilot, the idea was clear. Let's do it. Let's implement the Driven Mrp. But suddenly, in 2020, something changed. So what changed? So we had a virus with a new virus that changed everything. So our focus was not implementing the Driven Mrp. We had other important things to cover. Our focus was not to stop producing in our factories. We need to find alternative vendors when the vendors were failing because we had a lot of COVID cases. We need that our employees were healthy, that this was to put some security measures. Nevertheless, we didn't stop thinking about the Driven Mrp. So what we did next is a second global pilot, which means global. So you have seen that we have 3 regions where we produce and where we have hubs. We try to implement the Driven Mrp in the 3 regions at the same time. So we did internal the Driven Mrp trainings for all the 3 regions. And the idea is that each of the regions are training also their units. It's more effective that that the training of the Driven Mrp in a Chinese plant is done in Chinese. So we were doing some trainings also in Chinese. The pilot software now was not our own pilot, so we use Replacement Plus demo version. This is the software from the Driven Technologies. To upload all the data, we call it a Replacement Plus pusher, and basically with a robot, we were updating all the information into this demo version of Replacement Plus. The scope is global, so 1,900 materials, and then 3 plants in Europe, 2 plants in China, and 1 in US. We will have in the 3 hubs and the 3 POs. Also, a recommendation of Carol was to begin with the hubs, because if we have a stable planning in the hubs, we will reduce automatically the bullwhip effect through the whole supply chain. The KPIs were good, of course, not as good as in the first pilot because COVID was affecting a lot. So OTD was flat, which was a success if we compare with the materials that we were using MRP. We cannot have a value for sales order reconfirmations because we had a lot of cancellations, we had a lot of issues. Missing parts in production were reduced by more than 50%. Still the same trend, we see clearly that the availability of stock was better, and the inventory reduction was more than 5%.
Valerie, I'm sorry, you have 5 minutes more.
5 minutes? Okay, I will try to speed up. So then the question, is the Driven Mrp a good solution for us? Now we can answer that yes, and we have 5 reasons why. The first one is the model. The model is a solid model. So when Chad Smith and Carlo Petak invent this model, they use several other technologies. So use MRP, DRP, Lean, Theory of Constraints, Six Sigma. Our references, internal, our pilots were good, and externals. So we didn't trust in other consultancy companies. We were trusting in external experiences from other companies. There is an MIT report, which is quite good, quite objective, that was pointing out the value of the Driven Mrp. And then our strategy. So it perfectly fits in the idea of simplified planning that we developed some years ago. And also, globally, we want in Mettler, Toledo, that supply chain is a competitive advantage for us. So how we did this implementation? So here you can see the classic approach for implementing a planning software or even an ERP. Typically, we go unit by unit and we implement, so a team created that goes to each of the units, and then we implement this new planning software, in this case, the Driven Mrp. Our approach was completely different. So our approach, we have the experience of the pilots that we were able to develop global pilots. And if we are able to develop global pilots, we can implement demand-driven MRP in the 3 regions at the same time, and more or less in 3 or 4 months. So it's possible to implement demand-driven MRP in Europe, US, and China at the same time. Also, we are implementing demand-driven MRP for all types of products. So some of the companies, they implement it for biomaterials and intercompany or distributed materials because the benefit of stock reduction and less stock out is bigger. But we have seen also that in make materials, we have more stable production. So we wanted to implement for make materials as well. And we were implementing demand-driven MRP without traveling. So quite challenging. So how we were doing this? To do this, we need 3 things. And this is the 3 things that we need. We need to create a climate of change. We need the organization to be engaged with this change. And we need to sustain the change. This was described by John Cotters in his 8-step model. And we are using this model to implement the demand-driven MRP. So we established, these are the 8 steps of the John Cotters model. So we established the urgency of this implementation. We built up regional teams. We have a vision that is the global processes, but the units, they have to honor the change. We communicate the strategy in the 3 units. All the 3 regions are empowered to run the processes. So the global function is not responsible of the performance of each of the units. And also we create short-term wins with the demand-driven MRP pilots and some implementations. The way that we are doing this, it will lead to have a that the change is sustained during the time. So we will promote improvements in the demand-driven MRP template, and something that we are doing as a global function, we are incorporating the local improvements they suggest in the units as a global standards. Finally, where we are. So the scope for 2021 and 2022 is to implement demand-driven MRP. So we are going to implement demand-driven MRP today we have it in 6 plants. Next week we go with another plant. But the goal is by August 2022, we will implement demand-driven MRP in 20 plants with this model of implementing in several plants at the same time of the 3 regions. We are doing flow optimizations. So we are checking our MOQs, we are checking our intercompany lot size, we are analyzing our spikes. All of this is part of the scope of this project. Also, we are using part of the demand-driven SMP. So we say that we use the demand to past consumption to define the buffers. We have some exceptions. So we use the forecast in some cases. When we have big promotions, big orders or projects like retail, and we use the forecast instead of the demand to size the buffers. For new product introduction discontinuation, we use the forecast instead of the demand. And for the Q4 seasonality, we use also the forecast instead of the demand to size the buffers. For the following years, for 2023 to 2026, we want to implement the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. We want to do tactical simulations, stock optimizations, opportunities. We want to implement smart metrics, so flow-oriented metrics instead of cost metrics. And we want also to develop a strategic business plan that has agreed by finance, sales, supply chain, and PLM. And one of the keys that today we try to do this as well, but we focus too much at SKU level. We want to do it at product family level or even higher hierarchy. We want to do capacity analysis, stock projection, very similar. This is not changing so much. The traditional SNOP that we want to have a strategic business plan for the long term. And with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Valery. Now we will pass the deck. But before passing, we have the question in the chat.
Yep.
So
Yes.
why are you not using one of the current existing BI systems for these purposes?
These BI systems,
Yeah, it's just a question. Yeah.
we are using so the Driven Institute has several softwares that are authorized to run the Driven Mrp. So we are using Replenishment Plus, and we were considering other softwares as well as Orchestra or IBP from SAP. Finally, we decided to one of these. So we are using one software that was admitted by the Driven Institute.
Yeah, thank you very so much. It was the great support.
We have one more question. I will ask it in Russian and then translate. Как вы обучали персонал новому подходу? Сколько времени это заняло? И было ли какое-то сопротивление? How do you train your staff for the new approach? How long it was? Were they in some opposition?
So we know that. So the three challenges that we had for this project, we know it in advance. One of them was the technology challenge. So we need to connect the interfaces correctly, and this will define if we will be on time or not to implement the Driven Mrp. The second one was training. So training, especially when it's not on site, is challenging. And the third one is the change management that we have explained. For the training, what we are doing is we are providing from the global team where I'm working, we are providing all the trainings in PowerPoint, but also in video. These trainings has no more than 30 minutes, are no more than 30 minutes length. So we try that all the trainings are very short. These trainings are checked also for each of the regions, and they train their people in English, in America, or in German, or in English in Europe, and in Chinese in China. But from the global functions, we do these trainings. We do a lot of trainings. At the beginning, we had trainings.
Recording in progress.
We had trainings very long, but this was failing. So we try to do short trainings, also interactives in the middle. We have always a question in Microsoft Forms or in Mentimeter. And these trainings are performed in the local language by each of the regions.
Valerie, thanks for your presentation. Мы тогда движемся к следующему.